Hello everyone, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And I'm Aaron.
And this is the Bible Reloaded.
Yes, it is. And today we are doing the infamous chick tract Big Daddy ? With the one, the only AronRa. I don't know how to describe Aaron as anything other than a very intimidating, brilliant, fun man.
So I think most of our audience probably knows who you are, but for those who may not, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and all that good stuff.
All right. Well, I don't think of myself as intimidating, and I try not to play that up too much. But what I am, I'm an activist against for accuracy in scientific education. I did a series of videos exposing the foundational falsehoods of creationism, and a subsequent video series trying to explain the rules and the limitations and guidelines that apply to evolution. And I'm now going to start doing educational videos for following the Common Core standards and also the Texas TEAC standards to be used as classroom supplements.
I have no segue, so we're going to do this without a segue. So screw you, people who are listening to this that demand a segue. We're going to jump right in to Big Daddy by the one, the only Jack T. Chick.
By the way, Chick.com, for those of you who are interested, who make these religious tracts, the significant effect that they had on me as a kid, I read my first one when I was 8 years old. Somebody came over to my house to drop one of these off, and I read it, and I realized at 8 years old that this comic was written below my aptitude level. And it was nothing but hate speech. Now, this was, of course, before anybody said the word hate speech. I just realized that it was not only insanely stupid, it was also extremely hateful. And why would anybody ever have a comic book like this? This was so amazingly bad. It wasn't this particular one, but it's you know how all of Jack Chick's stuff is hateful. Yeah, that's why Chick.com is listed by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group.
Mm-hmm. I think they're banned in Canada, too, aren't they?
Well, very likely. The Southern Poverty Law Center lists a lot of hate groups, and almost all of them are religious affiliations, including the American Family Association.
If you want to condone your hate of gays, just put family in the title, and people will go along with it.
Exactly. But anyway, how many of you believe in evolution?
Apparently he does. And also, he has a gorilla with a banana in the background?
I think it's a chimp.
Let's just try to imagine somebody who promotes the understanding and the study of evolution, somebody who's going to teach evolution, who asks if you believe in it.
That's one word I think we all try and avoid when discussing it with people who don't understand it.
Yeah.
Because we have to explain it's not just a belief.
Yeah.
If my professor asked me if I believe in evolution, I would ask for a different professor. Because I want somebody who actually knows what he's talking about.
We do, sir!
Yeah, which means that this comic book obviously did not take place in Texas.
Yeah.
So, anyone disagree?
I do, sir.
You can get out of my class after you've apologized to everyone for your rudeness and ignorance. We might let you back in.
I think he's gonna have a stroke. I always like the clearly asshole atheist in chick tracts. Like anytime there's someone who's irreligious, they're just a cunt to everyone in the whole area.
Yeah, and the funny that nobody acts like this. Not even creationists act like this, and they are far worse behaved than we are.
Right.
What is the real attitude when you meet somebody that is now in a college class and has obviously been deluded by creationist upbringing and indoctrination his entire life? Don't you feel sympathy for that poor kid? Because you're going to have to turn that guy from a sheep into a human being. Okay, moving on to the next panel. Our professor, who acts like no professor ever would, says, "On second thought, perhaps I was a bit hasty. I think I will systematically tear your little beliefs to shreds in front of the entire class." No, actually, I say that, so I guess I can...
Thank you, sir.
Crazy man!
Sit down! Because we atheists, which of course is all people who believe in evolution are always atheists. You can't have a Christian who believes in evolution. It's got to be a dichotomy. We can completely forget about Kenneth Miller and Collins, who directed the Human Genome Project. All these other people who were clearly Christian and traditional Christians who also accepted evolution, because they don't fit in the ridiculous little dichotomy that we want to paint. So all of us atheists absolutely hate when Christians are courteous, because Christians are always courteous, and they're always clean and well dressed with nice straight hair.
And we demand that they take a seat when we yell at them.
What makes you think evolution is untrue?
Because the Bible says that each kind...
Ha! Hold it, you fanatic! I could have you jailed for that! How dare you even mention the word Bible in school? You know it's unscientific. If you talk to me, it will only be in scientific terms. Do you understand? And then there's a subnote. We have to say that when he says he could have you jailed for that, there's an asterisk to a subnote from drdino.com. And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Dino is a convicted fraud still serving a 10-year prison sentence for fraud. The subnote says, it has never been against the law to teach the Bible or creation in public schools. And then it gives a citation of that. On the assumption that somebody would actually think that you could jail someone for mentioning the word Bible in school.
I know some people who think that way, especially on like my Facebook page. There are people who have such a persecution complex that they think that somehow their religion is going to get them thrown in prison, and they're not allowed to bring it into public places, even though that's completely opposite of what the Constitution says.
Yeah, and it's also opposite of what they did in 1963 when the Madeleine Murray O'Hair, they took prayer out of school, as they put it to me. No, they didn't take prayer out of school. At no time has prayer ever been removed from school. The only thing that they did was stop teachers from forcing children to pray to the teacher's particular religion. That's what happened. So that we have freedom of religion. Your kids can be a Jehovah's Witness and not have to swear allegiance to the teacher's God just because the teacher said so. But nobody understands that when they're on the Christian side for whatever reason. I'm being generalizing, of course. Obviously, there are lots of Christians who understand that there are secular Christians, but for the purposes of this conversation, because we're generalizing to death with this tract, then all the Christians have to be the diehard fundamentalist extremists.
Yeah, we can play this game too, chick. Yeah. And also, atheists. In Kentucky, there was a law. I don't know if it's still in place because American Atheists took them to court, but their state's Office of Homeland Security, if you didn't acknowledge that the Almighty God gave you protection, it could have resulted in 12 months prison for open atheists in Kentucky. So the opposite of this tract is true?
Yes, that's true. Next, our professor says, young man, all the evidence is overwhelming. All the schools teach it. It's accepted everywhere. DNA proves it. Science proves it. Carbon-14 proves it. Facts, facts, facts. Huxley, G. Gaylord Simpson, Darwin, even National Geographic and Time magazine knows about it.
The author of this tract apparently does not know that National Geographic and Time are not peer-reviewed journals that would be cited for evolution.
I just saw a Time magazine the other day in the market that said, "Women of the Bible, what you can learn from them."
Now, let's pay attention to the fact that he gives all this evidence, right? Well, he didn't really explain any of the evidence. He just shows that it's overwhelming, right? Okay. Yeah. So if we take it on faith, okay, that maybe that this guy knows what he's talking about. He just gives a bunch of different citations. But what's funnier is when it gets even more general. When he says facts, facts, facts.
I think that's the part of the conversation where the creationist just stops listening, and that's what they imagine.
Yeah, he's actually saying actual facts and backing them up with citations afterwards, but all they hear is it's like the teacher in Charlie Brown was like. Bah, 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 bah.
I've actually seen this happen. One of my dearest friends in high school, somebody I really cared about and respected a great deal, sadly became a fundamentalist preacher and the principal of a Christian school that teaches creationism, and his school has this doctrine written in the opening of their book that gives their outline, their statement of faith. It says that they teach that the Bible is the only source of truth in our world, and that anything that contradicts the Bible is a lie.
Wow.
Everything that contradicts, which of course is everything. So reality itself is a lie compared to this compilation of lies. And when you start to prove your point, and as I tried to do, I spent 4 or 5 hours in this guy's office trying to reason with him. We hadn't spoken in many years, and so I'm having an in-depth conversation. When I start laying out indisputable, inarguable realities, I saw him smiling with glassy stare. He looked exactly like a mannequin. And I could tell that there's either nothing happening in there at all, or he's chanting mantras in his own mind. And so when I'm finished giving my indisputable argument, I get this warm smile saying, "Well, it's really great to see you again. Stop by when you can't say so long."
Wow. Nice and dismissive.
Exactly.
This part I fucking hate so much. Are there not 6 basic concepts of evolution?
No.
Yes! So the professor lays out the 6 concepts of evolution, which apparently exist only in the mind of Kent Hovind in some maximum security prison somewhere. Where the first type is cosmic evolution. That's the Big Bang makes hydrogen.
Hydrogen specifically, nothing else.
That's the only element.
We are in a universe of hydrogen. What is that giant helium ball doing? Hydrogen only, damn it.
Okay, so then you have step 2, which is chemical evolution. This is where the higher elements evolve. And then step 3 is evolution of stars and planets from gas. Then step 4, organic evolution, which is life from rocks.
Yeah, life from rocks.
Now,
I hear this one an awful lot.
Me too.
The chairman of the Board of Education for my state actually said that he would not allow evolution to be taught in school because evolution teaches that nothing made a spider out of a rock.
Is he the current?
At least that's a fact. Nothing has ever made a spider out of a rock.
That's true, I guess. If you put commas in the right place there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, you got me there. And then you have macroevolution, which is changes between kinds of plants and animals. And anybody that wants to argue kinds, I'm the guy that you want to talk to. I have a video. It's on the. If you go to my channel,
we'll put a link in the description.
You go to my channel. The featured video that shows up on the primary screen is the phylogeny challenge, and if you know what a kind is, you're the only one on Earth who does. And you're welcome to tell me what a kind is. You'll get a Nobel Prize. I can guarantee it. And if you can answer my phylogeny challenge, you'll disprove evolution. Beautiful. Thank you. And best of luck to you. But nobody answers that because there's no such thing as a kind. Creationists made up that word. The word jumps about between the species level to the family level, except when they realize that humans are in the ape family. Then they have to pull it back a bit.
Right. Yeah. I know both Jake and I have heard this, and it's so strategically elastic. It can just mean whatever the fuck they want it to mean to try and jam. It's trying to apply. I don't even have a good analogy, but they're trying to apply.
I have a good analogy. Did you ever read Beyond the Looking Glass? Remember Humpty Dumpty. When I use a word, it means precisely what I mean it to mean.
Right.
No more, no less.
Yeah, and it's always like, I always hear Ray Comfort in the back of my head like, dog kind, cat kind. That was a terrible Kiwi, but it's all right.
Yeah, I had the displeasure of having an argument with him about that, in which I pointed out the videos that I made on the feline and canine evolution and how they are linked morphologically and genetically and through the fossil record as well. And of course, there's not a lot of discussion we can have there because he's not going to pay attention to things because that's just facts, facts, facts. Time for his eyes to go all glassy stare. See, the professor says that there is 6 kinds of evolution, ending in microevolution, which is changes within kinds, which of course we've already established that's not correct. So the Christian says,
only the last one has been observed and can be called science. This kid knows Ken Ham, apparently. The first 5 are believed by faith.
He's got a point there!
I I don't like your attitude. Let's discuss prehistoric man. But before we do that, I want to remind people, and I should have already, that in my series, the 11th Foundational Falsehood of Creation, it discusses macroevolution, what macroevolution actually is, what the true definition is and always was when evolutionists invented the word and the definition that goes along with it, and that it has been directly observed. That's macro, M-A. Macroevolution has been directly observed and documented dozens of times, and the citations are included in that video.
That is down in the description. Click on it.
So, here is the first, most famous clue to early man, the Neanderthal skull cap. And he's not holding a Neanderthal skull cap, amusingly. He's holding...
It looks like a dead manatee.
The skull cap he's holding, amusingly, is actually from Homo erectus, I think it's erectus. It's not Neanderthal.
See, without you, we never would have fucking known that.
Are you telling me Jack Chick didn't do research?
Jack Chick didn't research his own damn book. He didn't research the Bible either, but. What this guy is holding, I've seen the arguments for the creationists arguing that this is not for the species it was originally identified to be, that it was, there's a regular human and everything, and that it came from some other species entirely. But then that exact skull cap was identified by different creationists as being 100% ape and 100% human. And then more amusingly than that, not only could they not agree, would different creationists agree with each other whether that was 100% human or 100% ape? The same guy, Dwayne Gish, identified the same fossil at one point as being 100% human. And then when he's shown the same fossil again, years later, he identified it as being 100% ape.
That's amazing.
Wow, it's almost like they're in a gray area, like they're transitional.
Which is the best way to tell when it's transitional, is when the creationists can't agree and argue with each other that it's 100% on either side of whichever line they want to.
So they're our litmus test from now on. Do we have a transitional fossil? Ask Kent.
Yes, exactly. Modern dating methods show man to have lived, or man to be older than Darwin could have imagined. Lucy, the oldest known ancestor, is 2.9 million years old.
Only 2.9 million, Richard Leakey found a normal human skull under a layer of rock dated 212 million years. I'm sorry, sir, but most experts now agree that Lucy was only an unusual chimpanzee and not a missing link asterisk.
And the asterisk will point you to a video seminar part 7 by the one, the only Dr. Kent Hovind, who, by the way, his doctorate comes from Patriot University and is in Christian education.
And Patriot University is a single-wide trailer sitting out in the desert somewhere. So, yeah, getting back to this, on this, the 2.9 million years, and Leakey finding another skull under a rock of a perfectly modern human, I was presented with things like this about Leakey and these ambiguous fossils that he supposedly found, and I didn't trust the video seminar by the guy we know has lied about absolutely everything, including his own education and all of his past credence teaching high school for 15 years, which he never did. Mm-hmm. And the doctorate that he doesn't own and all of that. So I went to a different source. I wrote to Richard Leakey himself. And Leakey responded, and he told me that out-of-context quote mining was the creationists' staple of activities, and that their stupidity he found astonishing. Where he said he never failed to be amazed by the creationists' astonishing stupidity. And then he went on to refer me to a number of his past works.
You would have talked to Richard Leakey, too. Man, what a good person to have on this tract.
Will you sit down?
Yes, sir.
Again, he's extremely polite.
And I got to mention that the other thing that most experts now agree, that Lucy was only an unusual chimp. Mm-hmm. No, not one single expert anywhere ever believed that she was just an unusual chimp.
Unless your control group is a single Kent Hovind and he is also your single expert, then yes, most would agree.
Okay, so moving on. The professor now says, pieced together by fragmentary fossil evidence, science can show the stages of man's long march from ape-like ancestors to sapiens. with wonderful names like proconsul, Australopithecus afarensis to Homo habilis and to Homo erectus, and on to become modern man.
Sir, I have in my possession a similar chart showing some amazing findings which are rarely made public. May I show it?
This should be interesting. Yes, let's see it. Science always has the answers.
And apparently the professor carries around either a fossil or a single chicken femur, because it's I don't know any professor that's just like, here's a fossil, watch me handle it all the time in class. I hope it doesn't break.
Then the Christian shows a list of fossil hominids, and this I do a tear down of these 2 yellow pages in the 13th foundational falsehood of creationism. Yeah, where it talks about the creationist frauds and the creationist accusation of evolutionist frauds. Lucy, for example, was not a chimpanzee. Neither was she only 3 foot tall. Heidelberg man is, let's see, built from a jawbone that was conceded by many to be quite human. Of course, it was quite human. Homo erectus is human, Homo heidelbergensis is human, Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis are both human. People say, well, that's not a human, that's a Neanderthal. No, Neanderthals are human. People don't understand what that means. Homo sapiens is not the only human species. Everything that begins Homo is human species. Mm-hmm. Heidelberg is the ancestor for Heidelbergensis, the ancestor for the 2 sister species, Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis. Even if they interbred somewhat at the beginning, doesn't matter. They're still sibling species. Nebraska man, this one is one that was often touted as an evolutionist fraud. In fact, it was a single tooth that was discovered by somebody that thought that it might have been a ape tooth. Mm-hmm. But after the entire scientific community criticized him for it for 5 years, demanding that he come up with better evidence than that, and I mean everybody, the entire scientific community rejected it. All of them. Mm-hmm. It didn't fool anyone. Creationists want to say that he fooled the entire... No. Not one person bought it.
I hate when creationists try and take something that shows why science works,
right,
and then says, like, no, you were wrong. Yes, this guy was wrong. His claims are wrong.
And that's the point. Yeah.
It was filtered through a process to take out bias and make sure that only the most correct at the time as we understand it.
Yeah, nobody believed it, and so after 5 years, the guy that came up with the idea and suggested it might have been human conceded that there was not enough evidence to make such a claim, and he retracted his own claim honestly. This is another thing that science does and creationism doesn't. Piltdown man. The jawbone turned out to belong to a modern ape. Well, to be specific, it did, but only because humans are modern apes. All of us. No Piltdown, but otherwise, the Piltdown man was the only actual fraud in this whole list, and we don't know who perpetuated that fraud. Everybody wants to say that it was evolutionists, the entire conspiracy of evolutionists together trying to create this thing for Piltdown man. In fact, the 3 suspects, all with personal motives, one of them being the author of the Sherlock Holmes books, who wrote about how in one of his early books how to falsify human fossils. He lived next door to the man who discovered this particular fossil, and it is believed that he might have planted that because he believed, and you're going to love this, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle believed in fairies and magic.
Wow. That's funny because that seems like the kind of thing that Sherlock Holmes would just shit on someone for.
Isn't that so interesting? Sherlock Holmes would look at it logically and deduce and be like, no, fairies are bullshit. But Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's like, totally awesome.
Yeah, so Arthur Conan Doyle actually did believe in fairies and magic, and he hated the London Museum of Natural History specifically because they endorsed methodological naturalism, and that dissed on his belief in magic.
Well, thank you for ruining Sir Arthur Conan Doyle for everyone.
Now, he wasn't the only suspect. There was also there was a lawyer involved who had the knowledge and expertise and a kind of semi-fraudulent background. He's highly suspect too, not the least of which reasons being that he was a lawyer. And then one of the assistants working at the museum also had the chemicals found, the chemicals necessary for the artificial aging process were found in a trunk of his belongings. So circumstantial evidence, and it might even have been all three of these guys working in cahoots, we don't know. But the thing is, it was not the evolutionist community that perpetuated this fraud. It was actually the evolutionist community, if you want to call it that, and you shouldn't, who discovered that it was a fraud in the first place. It was actually evolution that proved Piltdown Man was a fraud, because Piltdown did not line up with everything else that they were finding. Now, so we have with Nebraska Man, we have a simple mistake that's honestly conceded, and we have with Piltdown Man, we have the one fraud perpetuated against evolution, not by evolution. And then we have Peking Man, only 500,000 years old, but all evidence has disappeared. At one time, toward the end of World War II, that statement would have been correct, but Peking Man fossils have since been recovered. Again, there were quite a lot of them.
You can find pictures all over Google of them. I did a search before we did this on all of these, and yeah, you can see pictures of the actual fossils.
Yeah, because we have new ones now, and there was quite a lot of them, because Peking Man is a subset of Homo erectus, and Homo erectus was all over the place. It's one of the sad things about paleoanthropology that we know that Homo erectus had huge diversity, way beyond what modern man has. You know, we sometimes categorize ourselves as being in different races. We are so identical compared to what Homo erectus evidently was. Because we can have virtually identical skulls, different color skin, different types of hair, whatever, right? We're not significantly different in every other way. Homo erectus could vary in size by as much as 4 feet.
Wow. I wasn't aware of that.
They could vary in the size of their brain by 800 cc's. That's the variation of the brain size is 800 cc's. You have some that are, as adults, they're not any taller than 4 feet, and you have some that are as children that are 6 feet tall.
Jeez.
That's incredible.
And because they were dispersed throughout Europe and all across Asia, Northern Asia, Southern Asia, Tropical Asia, and getting into Indonesia and so on, you can imagine we also had hugely different colors. We know that we had a lot of different facial structures. We had so much diversity in these groups. And the cultural diversity we'll never know.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Moving on. Neanderthal man. Described here. Now let's see, I think this is one that describes as an old man with rickets.
Yeah, arthritis.
Okay, now this information may be a bit dated because I'm remembering it from an old article from more than a decade ago, I think. But at that time, there was at least 250 Neanderthal men, women, and children that had so far been discovered with consistent traits between them. Obviously not an old man with rickets.
Maybe arthritis was just rampant.
Yeah.
Yes, and it always created a sloping forehead and a jutting brow and a larger occipital region than Homo sapiens has. Neanderthal man, on average, had a bigger brain than we do.
It's interesting to me, too, that they're on this chart as if they're trying to say that we are descended from Neanderthals, even though we coexisted. We were, you know what I mean, we're related species, but we both derived from the same ancestor species.
Right, and then they
There's a little bit of interbreeding.
I want to skip New Guinea Man just because New Guinea Man was made up out of nothing. I don't know where that idea came from. This was pulled straight out of Kent Hovind's colon. There is no there's no mention of New Guinea Man that I've ever come across in anything. I have no idea what he's talking about here. I don't know what he could have cited. He had to have read something somewhere that said that. No clue what it was. It's probably a reference to another Homo erectus because we know that they were Homo erectus all through Indonesia and just practically everywhere. Then, of course, Cro-Magnon men, which we don't really even need a name for that because that's effectively, it's anatomically, it's culturally modern humans essentially. There's the name paints a picture it doesn't deserve. We could just as easily call them Caucasians if we wanted to. Yeah, because they're actually referring only to a region, and that region happens to be northwestern Europe. So, if we find a fossil from that period in that time, we're going to call it Cro-Magnon because we're stupid that way, and not because it actually is of any classification that needs that title. And then, of course, modern man is another one because Cro-Magnon and modern man are the same thing. And where it says in this category, it says that this genius thinks we came from a monkey. Well, amusingly, we are monkeys. We still are monkeys. It's not that we came from monkeys. We actually are monkeys. A lot of people want to argue this. I did a video about it called Turns Out We Did Come from Monkeys, wherein I explained that humans and modern cercopith monkeys, and humans and other apes, because we are apes also, and modern cercopith monkeys both derive from another older version of the Old World monkey, which is now otherwise entirely extinct, called Proplyopithecus monkeys. And they include, like, Egyptopithecus, for example. He's killing me. I've got to play it cool. Now, why would it kill you if somebody had facts that, and this kid doesn't, obviously, but in the reality, if somebody has facts and they show that you are wrong, aren't you going to be, if you care about truth at all, which, you know, we would, or we wouldn't be atheists. I mean, there's nothing, atheism doesn't offer anything. You know, it doesn't offer us a magic life in a forever kingdom, in a mansion if we imagine it, and we can always be young and healthy and beautiful and live forever and never have any pain. It doesn't offer us anything but reality. That's all we're embracing here. The reason we are atheists is because we want to know what is true, and, you know, that means what is evidently true, and we know that religion isn't. All these layers of life on Earth are millions of years different in age. We can tell these ages, the age of these layers from the fossils they contain.
But sir, how do you date the fossils?
That's a good question. We can tell the age of the fossils since we know the age of the layer of rock where they were found.
Sir, isn't that circular reasoning? Because no radiometric dating methods exist at all.
and yet this is such a common argument. I've seen it done in museums where they would talk about, where creationist groups will bring their field trips into the museum and they'll talk about how these evolutionists use the circular reasoning, and they'll do this right next to the descriptive plaque that shows how it's really done. Yeah. You know, and that index fossils were used for relative dating where there was no actual date in age. It's just relative to other things. So you can't put an age date on it. And it wasn't until you had radiometric dating that you could put an age to the rock layers. And you already know what layers come ahead of others, and then the radiometric daters only confirm that.
How can you say the layers are different ages? Petrified trees, asterisk, are often found going through many layers. Some are even upside down, running through millions of years worth of rock.
And how would creationism explain that? Because trees don't grow upside down, do they?
You know, the flood. That's their one answer for any incongruity. The flood. Yeah.
And so the flood is supposed to have trees that grew through millions of layers and then overturn that. Now, we know that geology has effects of folding under high pressure, and you can have things that end up going sideways. You have unconformities where uplifts and upheavals will push things under extreme pressure over a great long time. You'll have rocks bending in certain directions, so you end up with vertical trees growing through layers sideways and so on. Now, why do they go through the multiple layers? Because these are trees that are in swamplands, and swamplands tend to flood periodically again and again. And so you'll have one tree that gets many sedimentary layers dumped on it in rapid succession, but it's not the same thing as what you see at the Grand Canyon, where you have percolating types of sedimentation that require necessarily great vast periods to be laid down and can't be done like the flood level layers that they're talking about with polystrate trees. Well, here's proof of evolution. Human embryos have gill slits, proving that man evolved through the fish stage millions of years ago.
I don't think that argument has been used in the past 2 centuries. Sir Ernst Haeckel made up those drawings in 1869, and they were proven to be wrong in 1874. Those folds of skin are not gills. They grow into bones in the ear and the glands of the throat. So why would this Chick Tract even bring it up? I've never heard anyone make this argument ever.
Well, because humans do have pharyngeal gill slits. They do, but we didn't say that they were gills, but they are gill slits. Now, your development, embryology follows one of the laws of evolution, and yes, that evolution actually does have natural laws specific to it. That the embryological development that is the gill slits that eventually turn into the gill bars, or that turn into the bones of the ear in humans, and turn into gill bars in fish. It follows a different path. What Ernst Haeckel was arguing was that all things lived through the adult stages of their evolutionary pattern as they developed. Now, his argument was not pitted up against evolution or against creationism. He was arguing against another evolutionary theory. He was arguing against Ernst von Baer. And von Baer had a whole set of laws of embryology that defied Ernst Haeckel. Now, as far as the falsified drawings, Haeckel did 200 drawings of embryos. And he wasn't that great an artist. He was pretty good, but he wasn't that great an artist when it came to this area. He ran about a half a dozen of these for which he didn't have any reference. Now, as an artist, and not necessarily a scientist perspective, he drew what he thought those should be. And when you put down something that doesn't have a factual basis, when you say, well, these other things are like this, so this has to be like this too. When you don't have evidence to back your position and you state it anyway, we call that fraud. That is exactly what religion does, and that is exactly what creationism does with everything they do, but somehow they don't realize that it applies to fraud to them. If it applied to Haeckel, it certainly applies to them. And the comments that they made against Haeckel are more fraudulent against themselves. And this you can see in the 13th foundational falsehood of creationism as well.
Wow, wrong for 125 years and still in our book?
Yeah, the creationists in the Board of Education get really upset about Haeckel's embryos being included in textbooks. But they didn't get any less upset when those old drawings were replaced with micro photographs that show the same similarities and tendencies. They still complained, as if it was somehow a fraud to show micro photographs showing the same thing. I don't understand the mindset. So the professor thinks to himself, I hate him. Because that's what you would always do, right? You wouldn't. Yeah, but anyway, yep. And then he's destroying me. Vestigial organs like the human tailbone prove that we evolved from animals with tails.
I love their definition of vestigial: a shrunken part of the body that is no longer used.
Yes, well, I would say that our fingernails are also a vestigial organ. A couple of other good examples would be like the dew claw of a dog. Mm-hmm. But my favorite example of a vestigial organ is the arm of an emu. It is an arm, not a wing. Emus have, if you pluck out all their feathers, you will see that they have teeny tiny little arms like a Tyrannosaurus Rex has. And they have, on the end of that arm, they have one long finger. And the end of that finger is a claw. What makes it interesting is that vestigial does not mean that it has to be useless. The creationist here is saying that it has to be useless. That's not true. Right. It just has to be in a diminished capacity of its original use, or now being used for something different than it had originally been used for. The creationist in this tract is arguing that if it has a use at all, or if there's any point or function to it at all, then it can't be considered vestigial. But in the case of the arm of the emu, you have a claw on an arm that has no muscles attached to it.
Just in case someone comes up to it and tries to hit its hand.
The emu cannot move its arms except in the expansion of its ribs as it's breathing. The arms are useless. So why would you put a claw there?
Sir, there are 9 muscles that attach to the tailbone. It is not vestigial.
Whales have a vestigial pelvis. This proves they evolved from land-dwelling creature.
I'm sorry, sir, but those bones serve as anchor points for muscles. Without them, whales cannot reproduce. They have nothing to do with walking on land. Even if there were vestigial organs, it isn't losing this. I feel dirty saying this. Isn't losing something the opposite of evolution?
Yeah, losing our tail was not necessarily the opposite of evolution. And one of the interesting things is that the reason that we have such a large brain and simultaneously why we have impacted wisdom teeth in many cases, because our jaw is graceful and small, and this came from a mutation that has been identified that would have given us a substantial muscle mass in our jaws that would have connected to a sagittal crest atop the top of our heads, like the other modern African apes have. When you have this mutation that now gives us just a tiny amount of muscle, barely enough to eat with, then it allows for encephalization, which is now covered by another mutation where the defect in a tumor suppressor gene, which leaves us open for brain cancer, but it also means that this other part of our brain can grow to abnormal sizes at the same time. So you've freed up the restriction, and now you've got this other mutation that takes over the space. Well, so you've got the reason that we are smarter than everything else is due to two defective primate genes that function in every other primate but are useless in us.
Sir,
this doesn't make sense.
As this
non sequitur.
Just, fuck the biological thing we were talking about. Let's talk about this now. Sir, what is the binding force of the atom?
It's gluons. Sorry. Go ahead. Gotcha.
Wrong, sir. Gluons are a made-up dream. No one has ever seen or even measured them. They don't exist. It's a desperate theory to explain away truth. By the way, Jake, you looked this up since this tract came out in the Large Hadron Collider find gluons.
Yes. Actually, it was 2 years before this, 2000.
Oh, so Jack Chick just doesn't give a fuck.
No, right. he's like every day for him is Lethal Weapon. He has nothing to lose. He's out on the edge.
We know that the electrons of the atom whirl around the nucleus billions of times every millionth of a second, and that the nucleus of the atom consists of particles called neutrons and protons. Neutrons have no electrical charge and are therefore neutral, but protons have positive charges. One law of electricity is like charges repel each other. Isn't that magnetism? I know they're the same thing, but it's weird that he said just electricity.
Electromagnetism. Yeah.
Since all the protons in the nucleus are positively charged, they should repel each other and scatter into space, because I don't know what strong force is. If gluons aren't the answer, what is?
Those electrons you mentioned earlier help a lot.
It gets to the point where it hurts, doesn't it? Yeah. Now, how do you feel about somebody who reads this and thinks that this is truth?
They need one source. They know this comes from Jack Chick, who is probably a Christian of the same sort they are. Yeah. And they say, well, any claim he makes must be true, because I trust him. Yeah. And they just take whatever he says at face value.
And if you meet somebody who believes this kind of stuff, and they have any kind of personal charm to them at all, you're going to feel sympathy for somebody like this. I mean, and you can't just pat him on the head and walk away. You want to fix this problem. You don't want him to be deluded like this. There's no point in having people be deceived. But if you start to make sense to these people, what they invariably say is that, if you make sense, it's because Satan is talking through you. I don't know.
It's okay. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't hear you.
I said, I don't know. You tell me.
Now we have our defeated atheist.
And what is he defeated by? He's defeated. This is the wonderful thing about a creationist argument. They will deliberately ignore absolutely everything you ever tell them, including questions that they can't answer, and they know they can't answer, because the answer to the question will destroy their own argument. But they will ignore all of that, and they're looking for the one thing you can't answer, because if they can find one question out of 10 that you don't know the answer to, that means you didn't know the answer to any of them. Somehow they can dismiss everything. So if you don't know something, it means you don't know anything. And conversely, if they can't answer anything, it means they have the answer for everything.
Sounds like Sci-10 Bruggenkate.
Sir, may I quote from the Bible?
Yes, because of course, if you don't understand physics, if you're teaching biology and you don't understand particle physics, It means that you should believe mythology.
I think it's always interesting where they expect any scientist to be an omniscientist. Like
they know
he
everything.
knows all things.
And anything you don't know proves their mumbo-jumbo correct somehow.
Yeah.
It says that Christ, the Creator, is before all things, and by him all things consist. And they have to explain that are held together. Also it says, all things were made by him, Christ, and without him was not anything made that was made.
That's a convoluted statement.
Are you saying he is the creator?
Yes, easily persuaded man. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not.
I remember when I was like 22, and somebody comes up and says, "Hey, have you ever heard of Jesus?" And I said, "No, I've lived in the United States my entire life as an educated human being, and I've absolutely never heard of this mythology that is completely permeating every part of our culture."
It's always interesting too, because in all Jack Chick comics, it's like his universe is filled with people who have never heard of Jesus, and if only we had told them, then they would have been like, "Oh, that makes complete sense."
They'll understand why I'm quitting. They're intelligent, logical, compassionate scholars. Everything will be all right. I'll simply tell them that I can't teach any longer.
I like the one thing that was important to him was the gorilla with a banana portrait. Maybe he drew it himself. Maybe he takes really great pride in it.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I can no longer teach evolution. It can't possibly be true.
What? Are you crazy? Get out of our university. After you've apologized to everyone for your rudeness and ignorance, we might let you back in, you motherfucker.
I get that they're trying to get across some sort of academic
elitism,
I guess, but also to an extent, if you were like a teacher who taught geology and you went to the head of your department, you're like, yeah, that whole plate tectonics thing, I'm not really feeling it. I'm not going to teach that anymore. As long as you're not tenured, I'm pretty sure they'd be like, no, that's part of your job.
Yeah, and I remember you were talking about plate tectonics. I mean, I'm a pretty old guy now. I'm in my 50s just barely, and I remember when when I was a kid, tectonics had just recently taken dominance. There were actually people who still believed in the inflating Earth theory back then, and they considered until just shortly before I was born, they considered plate tectonics to be controversial.
I'll be the girl.
No, do we have to read that? Because that's the proselytizing nonsense.
Okay, if you don't want to, we don't have to.
Yeah, fuck it, you're right.
Okay, that's the part where it's Jesus-y. It has nothing to do with the tract.
Yes,
fuck
exactly.
All right.
So
yeah.
That was a pretty thorough takedown of Big Daddy.
Yeah, I'd say we covered it.
Well, glad I could help with that.
Yeah. Again, if you guys want to pause the video at any time, or if you want to go back and you want to re-examine stuff, we have links to every single one of the pertinent foundational falsehoods of creationism that Aaron has made, and some of the other links that we talked about. And honestly, I highly recommend that entire series, and pretty much every AronRa video is very informative and entertaining. But I think the bread and butter of that channel has to be Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism.
I'd agree.
Part 1 through 1004 or whatever.
Yeah, it's only a 15-part. I'm halfway through the book version of that. Yeah, and I'm having a good time writing it. The chapters are averaging around 9,000 words each, so it's probably going to be a big book. But
wow.
They asked me to flesh out the arguments. And one of the advantages of writing a book about that 5 years after doing the video series is that, I found all the little mistakes here and there when you're trying to rattle stuff off in 10 minutes, and I'm trying to slap everything together in 3 weeks' time and in the spare hours after work. There are going to be some mistakes in there. There's a few. But I've been able to correct those, of course, in the book, and I remember all of the criticisms that I got in the comment sections. And I remember anytime anybody had a point, I saved it. Anytime anybody had a good point, I'd saved it and referenced it. And I even made an errata video out of some of them. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun exploring that, and that'll be a lot more. I consider it almost peer reviewed, because the video series was tested so sternly.
Yeah.
That the book is going to come out pristine.
Right. And the video series I think is so thorough already. That book is, I'm definitely going to get that. That sounds like it's going to be awesome.
I mean, the video series is well written and illustrated the whole time. I mean, it's so much easier when you have someone who knows all the shit, and you're just so good at communicating facts. It's really enjoyable. It's strange for a lot of people to be entertained by educational videos, and it's one of the few actual times it's been pulled off almost perfectly.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
All right, so everyone, please subscribe to AronRa's channel. It's awesome. If you haven't seen it, I don't know what the hell you're doing on YouTube anyways. I mean, he's far more popular than us. You can catch him around the internet or in person because he travels all over the place. And he's been to Australia. He's been all over the place just making people think.
Right.
And it's a wonderful thing.
So, thanks everyone for watching. Until next time, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And I'm Aaron.
And this has been The Bible Reloaded.